So it's a day off for me today, and I'm working with plants all week. So what do I do on my day off? Go to a garden to have a look around. It's a nice day, so I thought I'm going to go to Abbotsbury Subtropical Gardens. It's just up the road for me, and see how it's looking in August. It's not going to be a full tour video, but let's just see if there's some really interesting plants out, because it's nice and warm, so this is the time of year. Some of the plants are going to look fantastic. I really love this part of the path. It's so effective, simple planting at its best. There's all this Libertia grandiflora, which isn't really the star of the show in August. It's when it's got all its white flowers earlier in the year. But underplanting all these giant cordylines and eucalyptus, it just looks really effective. It's all looking so healthy and lush as well. It's a bit dry, so some of the things are flagging a bit from the lack of water, but we've got massive banana leaves for the canopy, huge tetrapanax underneath this Calipanax septem lobus, which is that tree with this very ferocious looking stem that featured on one of our garden tours with David, the curator here. I think it's really important to say that even if you've got a massive garden, it's always worth going out and exploring gardens local to you, or making a weekend out of it, going further afield, finding somewhere new to go. I've obviously spent a lot of time at Abbotsbury, having worked here before and still being a regular visitor. But each time I come, there's something new, something that excites me or reminds me why I've got this passion for plants. So it's always worth going out and just kind of reigniting that passion, finding new plants, and take someone with you that shares the interest, because it's really nice nerding out about plants with other people. I mean, it's exactly why I chat to all of you in my garden and when I'm out in gardens like this. We love to share our passion. This shrub or small tree is Sparmannia africana. We are growing this on the Grow Paradise nursery at the moment. Now I know that this one has grown up to the base of that canopy there. It survived outside. Now this area is mostly frost-free. It probably has gone down to 0, maybe -1 at the worst. But it survived. It's lost a lot of that height. You can see some of the old stem in there, but it has reshot. So it's definitely worth a grow if you're in a mild part of the UK, like a mild city garden or a coastal garden. And it's got a really nice feature with white flowers that actually open up, they move when you tickle them. And I think it's a evolutionary feature to allow pollinating insects in. This is another really nice shrub I don't think I've spoken about much on the Grow Paradise channel before. It's Coryngosoma. It has this leaf quite similar to that Sparmannia africana, nice lush green leaves on arching stems. And in summer, late summer, you get these kind of panicles of clusters of yellow flowers. Now, they never really look like they fully open to me. They always just open to about that amount, but it's something a bit different. It's completely hardy. It's a herbaceous perennial, so it dives back to ground level, but it puts on all this growth in one season. So definitely something a bit different to try and grow. And if you are somewhere quite mild, Tradescantia, which is more often sold as a houseplant, is something you should really try as a ground cover. This is a variegated form that emerges with pink variegation and it matures to this creamy white. It's Tradescantia Maiden's Blush. And you can see how it's just spread underneath the tetrapanax here, underneath the Trachycarpus palm trees. It's created a really tropical looking ground cover. And I've just clocked a really nice example of Bohemeria platyphylla. Nice big round leaves. You can see there's flowers down the bottom, so they'll have seeds too. This is probably one of my favourite Bohemeria. It's a really nice large example of an abutilon growing here. And you can see how they tolerate shade underneath the canopy of all these other trees, but they will still produce flowers. So this one I think is either canary bird or abutilon waltz. They're related to hibiscus. I talk about abutilons a lot on the channel. They're just well worth growing, and in the UK they'll take -5. The soft stems might get frosted back, but they tend to regrow very quickly in the warm weather of spring, and they have a tendency to get leggy, like this stem here. But it's great. You get height, you get flowers, and you get some really nice foliage. The foliage looks a bit like maple trees, so they've often got the common name of flowering maples. This plant is being used as a ground cover. It's well worth a mention. This is Plectranthus ciliatus, and I know that it's remained hardy in Abbotsbury, or perhaps half hardy is a better description. It's taking those light frosts, but it has these glossy leaves with this purple underside, and it will quickly grow in a prostrate manner where it just kind of spreads sideways. It's definitely one to give a go if you're in one of those milder locations. We'll be selling this again soon because I've got a parent plant that I'm currently taking cuttings from at the moment. You really can't beat a woodland garden on a day like this with the sunlight, the dappled sunlight just making it down to the forest floor. Then you've got these enormous exotics like this echium that I'm passing now. Look at the size of that. Mixed amongst camellias, oaks, rhododendrons, all sorts, just to give you that lush, jungly feel. It's just beautiful. Now in the forest floor here, when there's an opening that allows some sunlight down, you've got some of the more herbaceous, heat-loving exotics, like the gingers. Now, I've missed the flowers on these, but the foliage itself looks great, mixed in with the echiums there, the ferns. There's some ligularia, that's the yellow flowers that you can see there, all mixed in. It just creates kind of an enriched, tropical-looking forest floor in the UK, so almost everything you see here is hardy, or half hardy here, like the echiums. But in this microclimate, it's surviving and it's creating this really dense planting. And I've just seen here a hydrangea. Now this is Hydrangea aspera. And so many of us turn our noses up at hydrangeas, but this species, aspera, is definitely worth growing. You get this enormous foliage, really tactile, covered in a layer of fur, a bit like Roldana leaves. And then these really unusual hydrangea flowers that tend to always be in kind of electric blues or glowing purples. I'm definitely going to be adding one of these to the Grow Paradise garden because I think it looks fantastic, and they are hardy. Again, they'll get frosted back in winter, keep the basic woody frame, and then they'll quickly regrow. Another plant that I've talked about that I grow in our garden and I absolutely love in a forest garden is Woodwardia, and they use it to great effect here at Abbotsbury. This is Woodwardia radicans. Each of these leaves is easily 1 metre to 2 metres long. It's a walking chain fern, so it produces offsets at the tips of its leaves, little bulbils there that will touch the ground and root so that you can easily multiply it. I think this is one of the best ferns you can grow in the UK. It will get frosted back in a harsh winter, but quickly regrows. But that is a very jungly looking underlayer for kind of a forest type tropical style garden. And something that goes well with that are the hardy begonias. This one I think is Emianensis, which has a similar way of multiplying itself to Woodwardia. You can see just at the leaf axil there, where it joins the leaf, you get little bulbils forming. And again, you can propagate them from that, as well as from leaf cuttings like most other begonias. I was recently interviewed for a podcast, and I mentioned that I absolutely love hardy begonias because a previous guest on the podcast had said they didn't like begonias. And I understand that when it's the blousy, flowery types, but hardy, forest condition loving begonias are well worth a grow. They've got lush jungly foliage. Some of them can grow enormous as well. There's a massive leaved form called, it's a hybrid, Begonia torsa. Give it a go if you can find it. Completely hardy in the UK, provided with good drainage, and you'll get those enormous jungly leaves and Begonia grandis type flowers. This is a benefit of growing in a valley. You get these sweeping vista views over parts of the garden. Now obviously it takes quite a bit of maintenance to keep the view open because all the trees just want to grow in. But how beautiful is that? Again, enjoying that August sunshine. And an enormous oak trunk there for a sense of scale. There's a really nice viewpoint that's cut through the canopy too, where you can just get a glimpse of St. Catherine's Chapel just through the opening in the trees, which is very clever, but it does take maintenance, as I say, to keep the canopy open to allow that viewpoint there. There's some flowering gingers. I think this one is Hedicum Assam Orange. It's always one of the later flowering, slightly smaller and more compact, but definitely worth the grow nonetheless. Here's a Persicaria species that I don't think many of us grow. Persicaria polymorpha. It's an absolute giant. It's got these large green leaves and then these clouds of white flowers. And it actually looks to be relatively good at self-supporting itself. I know Persicaria red dragon will flop if it grows too fast in one season, but that one is definitely a contender for something I'm going to need to try. This view, as you come around the corner, the back of the Begonia grandis leaves is something I really like. It really shows off the red veins. And in late summer, they're all just starting to produce their flowers as well. So you get white flowering forms and pink flowering forms. And I've shared a bit more detail about these in recent videos on the Grow Paradise channel. Another stunning view as you come around the corner. You get that sense of scale, that opening with this pair of Trachycarpus trees, palm trees, just fronting this old structure here. There's something about red woodwork in a tropical style garden that really transports you to other parts of the world. And I know I said we turn our nose up at hydrangeas, but in a woodland garden like this, they really do add to it. Now I'm coming out of one of the sunnier parts of the garden into a shady part of Abbotsbury Subtropical Gardens, and it just goes to show, look how lush and green it is. If you've got a shady garden, it doesn't mean you can't grow plants. You've just got to find the right plant for the right place. I know it's a phrase that you hear gardeners say over and over again, but it's so true. You can grow shrubs, trees, ground cover plants, and you're going to get that lush feeling. And sometimes, in my opinion, shady gardens look far better because you get that lush green. They don't dry out as often as gardens that are baked in the sun. So don't be disheartened if your garden is in shade. Just find the right plants. Try begonias, ferns, some tough shrubs. Ducking here, this is I actually can't remember the name. Reverse. It's Cercidophyllum japonicum pendulum. It's a really nice tree. The leaves smell like burnt sugar and they just hang down like this. Again, one for when I've got a bigger garden. Looks like a nice spot to take a rest on a warm day like today. Now, if I remember correctly, as we head down here, and you can see what I mean about how lush it is with all these ferns, even though it's in shade under the canopy of the larger trees, we come to some of the really large-leaved rhododendrons. Now, this is part of the collection of rhododendrons at Abbotsbury. Look at this. This is a particularly rare rhododendron, and it's quite hard to grow in the UK. Definitely hard to source. Rhododendron prostistum, and it's an absolute monster. Just getting back here so you can get a sense of scale. Let me show you how big these leaves are next to my head. They are massive, absolutely massive, and it really, really does feel jungly. I love this plant. I've always loved this part of the garden. Like I say, on warm days, it was a nice part to come and take a cooling down rest. You've also got the aces down here, which look nice now in August, but if you come down to this end of the garden, down right at the far end, as autumn approaches, the aces turn their shades of fiery red. And it always felt to me like the air had changed colour. There was just this red glow underneath that canopy, especially as the low autumn sun sort of pushes its light through those intensely coloured leaves. Really beautiful. This is a plant that I didn't really take much notice of when I worked here, and I've just been looking at it now, and I think it's really beautiful. It's got willow-like leaves. I think it's evergreen, and it's growing as a small tree. It's Pittosporum elysioides, variety angustifolium. That's beautiful. Reminds me of the Podocarpus henkelii that I grow. I really like that. Now I'm crossing over the stream. Abbotsbury's in a valley, so all of the water runoff from the hills nearby runs through the garden through a series of Victorian-built silt traps. So the pond that's got the fallen tree in is part of that system. And one of my jobs when I used to be here was getting in my dungarees and digging out the silt traps. All of the silt that's run off of the farmland around here, digging it out, freeing it up so that the water could flow freely again. And it absolutely stank, and I was not allowed back in the house when I got home without instantly taking off the dirty clothes and running up to the shower, which, to be fair, I was in desperate need of. It really did pong. Imagine all those leaves that have been rotting in there for a whole season. Yeah, not a job I miss. This is nice. This is Rodgersia. Again, completely hardy and herbaceous. It dies back to below ground in winter, but it puts out these enormous leaves as a nice ground cover plant. So if you've got the space, try that. Perhaps if you're getting rid of Gunnera, then try Rodgersia in its place. It won't get anywhere near as big, but it's still got an enormous leaf for a tropical style garden. And actually next to it, they use the Gargantuous, which is the sweet flag, which we grow in the Grow Paradise garden, along contrasting against with this Ophiopogon, the black grass there, black mondo grass or lily turf, I think it's called sometimes. Now there's an enormous collection of hydrangeas here at Abbotsbury, and it's important that you don't forget that so many of these plants that we just see as kind of standard dull car park plants, they were brought into the country, they were seen as rarities and exotic, and as the years have kind of gone by and they've been popularised, we've forgotten that. That's why a lot of these gardens have rhododendrons, camellias, hydrangeas in really high numbers, because when we first started experimenting with some of these plants from other parts of the world, they were rare, they were exciting. To have plants that flowered this much, it was unseen in UK forests, in UK gardens. So obviously these gardeners got excited about it. And I think so many of the plants that we're all growing today that we are desperately searching out, the rarities, in time they're just going to be common car park plants too. Give it a couple of decades, there'll be Brasseopsis in all the supermarket car parks. Just look at the height on some of those tetrapanax there, popping way up, probably 3 or 4 meters tall. That looks very, very jungly indeed. And related to tetrapanax is this Brasseopsis mitis that's been in the ground for a number of years now. I don't think it gets protected through winter. It's an absolute beast. Now it's tucked out of the way a bit, to be honest. You don't, unless you go off the beaten track at Abbotsbury, you're not going to find it. My best description if you come to Abbotsbury is to go to the lake with the fallen log, walk up the stairs, and then you'll see a bit of sweeping lawn like this. And on the left is probably one of the biggest Brasseopsis mitis planted outdoors in the UK. Absolute stunner. You can see how its leaf form is just changing slightly. They're much less cut than when it's a younger plant. Actually, this is the first time I've seen it, just how much it's changed. Because when I was working here, that was probably a quarter of that size. And I suspect it's benefiting from being under the microclimate of these canopy trees here. But that's beautiful. Really, really nice. Now I realise I have a tendency just to walk around and saying that everything's beautiful, but I really do think so. There's not many plants at this time of year that don't look good, in my opinion. If they've had enough water, that is. There are some plants that can sometimes look a bit sad after a long dry summer. This plant here is Milanoselinum decipiens, or the giant cow parsley, or black cow parsley. This is from Madeira, but it's proven completely hardy in the south of the UK, and I think further north as well. It has this really cool stripy stem that looks a bit like a bamboo cane. And they're biennial, so it will grow like this from seed in its first year, and then in its second year, sometimes its third, it will put out a massive crown of umbellifer flowers, white flowers. The pollinating insects absolutely love it. And then after it's flowered, it's monocarpic, which means that it will die, but it produces hundreds of seeds, and it's really, really easy to grow from seed, especially fresh seed. So you can keep sowing, keep a succession of them growing in the garden, and you can enjoy these jungly leaves year after year in your own garden. I absolutely love lichen, and I think I'm going to do a video nerding out all about it at some point, probably in winter, because it's a really good marker of good air quality, but it is such an interesting organism. And it's actually out of the study of lichen that the term symbiotic relationship came into being. But I'll do that video later on in the year. So this is the path that goes along the stream that flows through the garden, with some very healthy looking tree ferns that obviously thrive in that humidity. More beautiful red woodwork, which looks as though it's had a fresh lick of paint. That's nice to see. A metasequoia, nice cypress that likes to have its roots in water all the time. Colocasia there, esculenta, I think they stay in the ground all year. And then we're heading towards the pond now that's got the fallen log in it, and it did have some carnivorous plants when I worked here. Some enormous Gunnera just towering up and over the water. I love how you get those rippling reflections on the back of the Gunnera leaves. Absolutely enormous. And then we're into the pond. Really nice lilies, no flowers just yet. That's the fallen log. So that was a tree that actually fell into the pond naturally from that bank up there. Then it was turned into a feature, and it had all these hardy epiphytic bromeliads. I think there's a lot of fascicularia in there, the one that flushes red. And then the island with more Dicksonia tree ferns in the middle. And then more massive Gunnera leaves on this side. It's surprisingly cool as well. You can feel the change in air temperature when you're near the water, despite being out in the open. The enormous Gunnera, massive ancient trees in the background, huge Trachycarpus that thrive, self-pollinate or cross-pollinate and self-seed around the gardens here. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through one of the Gunnera passages here to give you a sense of scale of the leaves. I feel like a borrower hiding under the leaves for shelter. They're absolutely enormous. They thrive in moist soil. We've had frequent rainfall this year, but they are right next to the river, so they get to get their roots in there, which keeps them really happy. I know after heavy rainfall, the gardeners need to come through and chop off any leaves that have collapsed and blocking the path. Now this bed is a bed that focuses mostly on monocots, which is a type of plant which a lot of grasses fall into. There's obviously tetrapanax in here that have started to sucker throughout the bed, but it sort of adds to it, gives a bit of contrast. But you can see the Arundodonax, the giant Spanish reed, and the size it gets to. This is a plant I recommend that everybody tries. Super tough in wet soil. They thrive really, really well. There's an absolutely enormous one of those Melanoselinum decipiens that must have flowered this year. You can see the striped stem on it. There's a multi-headed one here, which I've not seen happen before. But each one of these heads is absolutely packed full of seed. And next season, this ground will be covered in seedlings that can easily be dug up, potted on, and then spread around the garden. Next to that is Clerodendron bungii, which flowers late in the year with these pink flowers at the top of the stems. And you get these lush green leaves, again completely hardy. It's nice to see. Masses of Colocasia, I think Colocasia esculenta, growing up through this kind of damp trickling stream here. I think this actually used to be the old steps down from the Mediterranean bank before they built the new ones. And then they turned it into this water feature, which is sort of naturalised, but I think looks quite good. Now just here is a sea of Soncus, these giant tree dandelions. And you can see actually they flowered this year, so I'm a bit late, but it's yellow flowers you get on these, but they're getting those same seed heads that are carried by the wind, and there's just enough breeze to blow them around here. I don't know if it's the right conditions for them to self-seed, but the foliage looks amazing. It's a bit like an echium with this lance-shaped foliage, but you get the serrated edges. And I suspect in this spot, under the canopy of the evergreen trees, they're going to remain evergreen through winter. And it's actually a good sign because you've got the yellow flowering mushier here, Muschia wollastonii, with these almost orchid-like flowers. But again, it's happy enough to flower. It's grown to a pretty decent size. They will get bigger than that. And I've just clocked behind that Isoplexis canariensis. I think it may have changed its name a couple of times now, but that's what I'll call it. It's a nice orange flowering foxglove relative. These look beautiful. They're really, really big. And in this area, I think it's the Australasian area, you've got cordylines, phormiums, obviously tree ferns coming from New Zealand, loads of pittosporum. But you've also got, down here, a plant that goes by the name of kangaroo paw. This is Angioxanthos, which is grass-like, but it puts out these really weird furry flowers. You can get them in different colours as well, cultivated forms. Let me know if you'd like to have a go at growing this, because I can source them for the Grow Paradise nursery. Here's a tree that always stops people in their tracks. Look at the trunk on that. This is Luma apiculata. It's got this coppery bark with almost like a camo mottling on it. I really like this. When they're younger, they don't really colour up this much. But as they get bigger, you get that really nice colouring, and you get these small white flowers on an evergreen canopy. And once you've got one, they do self-seed, so you can prick out the little seedlings that pop up, grow them on, and share them with friends and family. But it's not always just about the foliage and the flowers. Sometimes it's worth remembering that you can grow plants, especially trees, with really beautiful bark as well. Beautiful, I've really got to stop saying beautiful. Stunning, striking, magnificent, glorious. In the centre of the shot there, with the cones hanging off the leaves, is a Woollemii pine. Now these are slow growing, very expensive because of that, and because they've been cultivated, reintroduced into cultivation from that very small discovery of plants. That original discovery has been protected and kept hidden. It was almost lost to a forest fire in recent years, but it's nice to see it being reintroduced and slowly re-established as a plant, because it's tragic to lose plants because of deforestation and wildfires. It's just sad. This just caught my eye, and they've signposted it too, which is great. An enormous yellow flower spike on an agave. This is Agave salmiana variety ferox, which is an absolute giant. And that flower spike's got to be going on for over 2 meters tall, covered in bees. But I suspect that's a death spike, which means that this agave will die after flowering and produce offsets from around the base. Okay, the gardens are getting busy now, and as I say, it's supposed to be a day off, so I'm going to enjoy wandering around the rest of the garden, but I thought I'd just share with you some of the plants that have caught my eye as I started to walk around. It's warming up too, so I think I'm going to go get an ice cream. Thank you so much for watching and coming on this walk around with me. Hit subscribe if you're enjoying the content that's coming out on the channel. And don't forget, if you're in the UK, feel free to check out our plant and seed shop at growparadise.co.uk. I will see you all in the next one. Have a great day.